So today's topic will be the airline economic survival in times of disruption. My name is Hossam, as I told you. I am right now a PhD candidate in Egypt, Japan University for Science and Technology. I'm around 1 year apart from finishing my degree, my PhD degree. So hopefully, let's hope that it ends soon. I got my master degree and my bachelor degree in aerospace engineering. I was specialized in aviation management and specifically in integrated airline planning. In 2005, I started my career in aviation, and at the same time, in a parallel career, I started my work for engineering simulations, machine learning, digital twinning. So I have a lot of experience in the simulation tools for finite element CFD and all of this types of analysis. I was working for Egypt Air, and I'm still actually working for Egypt Air right now for 16 years. I have been contributing in a lot of the committees in asset acquisition, basically in millions of dollars. So I have a lot of experience in that. I've been delegated by the Minister of Aviation in 2012 to join the planning team of Egypt Air. Usually I would like to know who is attending, but just to save the time and to be strict with the 1 hour limit that we have, I would recommend everyone to just write down your information so that you all know each other. I know that right now the people that we have are coming from different countries, different industries, some airline industries, some academic backgrounds, some people working in education and training. So if you would like to know each other, I would recommend for you to just share your information together. In the chat room, if you don't mind. Okay, so today's session, we will be tackling the next pyramid of knowledge. Okay, the first thing we will be talking about the airline ecosystem and stakeholders. Let's not forget that our top notch will be how to get a survival or how to survive the upcoming disruptions in the operation. Okay, so I will be within 1 hour. I will be trying to build the knowledge starting from the ecosystem of the airline and what are the nuances that affect actually our operation. Then we'll be talking about the integrated airline planning, the fleet asset planning, the scheduling and demand, including the delayed trends and recently the delayed trends. And at last, we will be talking about some potential solutions for the survival of the coexistence, what we call the coexistence with the other stakeholders, other airlines, other airport authorities, all the stakeholders in the planning process. Okay. So let's just start with a short story. In April 2020, the IATA published on their website that the social distancing that was suggested back then in 2020 would make most airlines financially unviable. This is a catastrophe. What happened basically is the IATA was trying to tell us, please pay attention, please just take your precautions, because if the ICAO and the regulatory authorities will force the airlines to keep one seat in between, or one seat in between every two passengers, this will be seriously economically unviable. So what happened after 1 year? 1 year later, the IATA published again on their website, and they said, 2020, I told you it was the first year in history of human being. It was the first or the most catastrophic year in the history of aviation, started in 1903 with the Wright brothers. So this will keep an eye on how to maneuver. We are getting into another disruption. We are expecting that 2022 will not be any better. I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but I'm just working on numbers. So this is the analytics that we have, and talking about some insights about the economic impact of the planning process, or about the airline operations. We'll start from 2020. In 2020, 96% of the global fleet worldwide was grounded. That is a huge number, okay, during to the response of COVID-19. The second insight, basically, we're talking about a very, very nice case that All Nippon Airlines in Japan, they went through. So they found that, you know, that Japan is having a lot of islands. So basically, to connect all of these islands, you will find that the demand stimulation is totally different, is totally scattered. You will not find any trend for the passenger stimulation. So what they did is they had a coexistent agreement, a bilateral agreement between the airport authority and the airline authority to have what we call the load factor guarantee. We'll talk about this specific case. And by doing that, they increased the demand 7% year over year. Year over year, 7%. That is a huge number for the airline industry. Just to increase the passenger demand 7% yearly, that's a very, very big number. Usually we're talking about like between 2 to 3%. This is what the IATA told us, between 2 to 3% globally as an average sectoring percentage. So the third case that we'll be talking about is the fleet asset planning impact. At the beginning of 1970, the Pan Am Airways, which was the main flag carrier in US, they acquired a lot, like 41% of their fleet was Boeing 747, what we call the jumbo aircraft, and was back then it was the biggest aircraft worldwide, and their block hour was more than $6,000 per block hour. That's a huge number. Like usually for the passenger aircraft, commercial aircraft, that we're talking about like 150 seats. We're talking about like around between $1,500 to $2,000 per block hour. The jumbo was like more than $6,000 per block hour. So what happened in 1973, the embargoes that happened between the Arab countries and Saudi Arabia specifically, and US and some of the other countries, and the price of the oil went 3 more times higher than what was in 1973. So starting from March 1974, the crisis started with Pan Am, and they couldn't afford the price of the fuel. Like the operating cost of this aircraft is huge. And then they lost, and eventually in the 80s, they had to even sell the main building of their company, and they have to declare bankruptcy. In also Southwest Airlines, they did a very, very nice deal, which we call the fuel hedging. Basically, they tried to stabilize the price of the fuel for 6 months and then for a year. And in the 90s, basically, they started this in the 80s. And then in the 90s, they started to save around 45% of the net income in fuel. They saved 45% of their net income that they were spending on the fuel, because they made a deal with the suppliers of the fuel, the Jet A1 fuel. They made a deal to basically to lock the price of the fuel to the lower prices. These are just like some insights about where the air economics is going. So let's talk about the target. What is our target? Productivity and profitability. Okay, everybody knows that. How to reach this? We start from the business model. Basically, you plan for profit. You just don't think about anything. And then you will find that there are the regulatory compliances that you need to apply related to safety management. So you need to spend more money in safety management. And then you will find that, look, you have some other political obligatories, because you are the flag carrier, or you are a big scheduled commercial airline, and you have your customers, and you don't want to lose your customers. So you go back to the reputation. Okay, shall I just cancel the flight and lose the reputation, or I shall just like lose the income and keep my reputation? This is a very, very tough decision to take. The stakeholders and the shareholders and everybody working in the airline industry will be facing these problems. Okay, so one last story that we will be talking about All Nippon Airways in Japan again. I love this story actually, because I started after the World War II in 1952. In 1963, they got a huge fundraising for a capital of 4.6 billion Japanese yen. In 1966, they had an aircraft accident. 1971, again an aircraft accident, again the same aircraft type, again Boeing, and then they had a great comeback. Right now they have more than 260 aircraft in their fleet. More than 212 of them are coming from Boeing. So they had this deal and bilateral agreements, not only through alliances, but with every single city that they can imagine. So they did bilateral agreements with the authorities, they did bilateral agreements with the other cities' authorities, the airport authorities, with other airlines. So they started to make joint ventures so that they can come up with alternate solutions and they can pass this catastrophe. So they passed a lot of their passengers to even other airlines, and they could increase the year-over-year passenger demand to 7%, as we said before. Okay, let's get into the topic. We will be, as I said at the beginning of the knowledge pyramid that we will be tackling, we'll start from the airline economic horizon, knowing the stakeholders, knowing how to deal with the system, and then we will put our hands on the points of disruptions just to solve. And then we will move to the fleet asset planning. So the framework of the airline economics is the cost and revenue analysis, basically. We start from understanding all the types of the cost, and in this section we will not talk about the classifications of the cost for commercial airlines. You will be surprised to know the numbers. For people who are not in the aviation industry, people coming from the academic research background, they will be really stunned with the amount of operating costs that you don't take into consideration in your research. And I went through that, and actually the results were a little bit like deceiving in some of the cases. So the regulatory obligations are very, very big effects and having a lot of impact for the airline operation. The subsidies and business collaborations, as I told you before, like the coexistence, the act of survival, the act of deregulation that happened in 1978, all of these subsidies and government support that can be going or giving to the airlines will even affect their framework of survival. So let's talk about the ecosystem of an airline, just to be able to tackle the main problems. We start with the operation policy, we go to the demand and forecasting, and then we assign the fleet asset planning. And this is a very, very big problem right now. If you're having, let's say, 100 aircraft to cover, let's say, 100 flights per day, and then for some disruptions, you lost the demand, you lost 2 aircraft went to the maintenance, unscheduled maintenance, whatever it happens, how will you maneuver with the huge assets that you have? You're talking about like assets in billions of dollars. The average price of just a medium aircraft is like $100 million. So multiply this by, let's say, 100 aircraft, and even if you go to the big airlines, you're talking about like 500 aircraft, 800 aircraft. Like, it's a huge number. So talking about the fleet asset planning, this is a huge hit that we need to talk about. Okay, so moving to the scheduling and integrated planning, we will talk here about the delays that is happening in the demand stimulation, and then how the CAs, the civil aviation authorities, and airport coexistence will support basically the airlines to survive. Talking about the operation policy, starting from knowing your business policy. Why are you operating your airline? Starting from the objective. What is your objective? Are you operating the airline just to make profit or public service like the flag carriers, or you're working in, let's say, TNT or DHL or like any of the couriers, air couriers? They have a lot of airplane also, or maybe Aramco, even Saudi Aramco, like they have like more than 15 aircraft on board. So like, I mean, big aircraft, like commercial aircraft. So we're talking about like, you need to decide exactly what you need to do with your business, and then to move to the network distribution. Are you working? Are you operating your network through hub and spoke or through point to point? Then are you low cost carrier or a full service carrier? Are you leasing your aircraft or you're acquiring the aircraft as an asset? Are you working regionally or globally? Are you covering like just the continent where you are located in? Are you having one hub or 2 hubs or like multi-hub? So all of these policies, you need to adjust them from the beginning and to keep into your mind that I can change at a certain point. For example, if I am operating like, and I saw a lot of examples of big airlines like that. If you are a full service airline and you're basically losing the demand stimulation for one of the sectors because they have any type of catastrophe. It doesn't have to be a virus, can be revolutions, can be financial devaluation, can be anything. does this mean that you can actually change your operation policy from full service airline to low cost? Is this valid? Yes, it is valid. But actually, I know specifically named airlines that tried to do this and actually they failed. And it was like, unfortunately, it was not a good strategy to move from the full service to the low cost. So we will talk about this in just a couple of slides. The network flow models that you need to keep into consideration when you are operating your airline. Are you operating your airline based on a minimum cost operation, or least time and shortest path operation, like the people working in, or like the airlines, not airlines, air couriers working like TNT and DHL, Aramex, like all of these couriers, they usually work in least time and shortest path, and they assign a lot of their income revenue to the insurance because they were working with assets of millions. Okay, in every aircraft is much more than the price that you pay as a passenger taking one seat. Dealing with freight is just a hassle. So the third one is a maximum flow, and usually we use this model usually in the time of Hajj. You don't care very much about the operating cost. You do care very much about like not losing the huge demand stimulations that you get in specific regions and specific times, like the Hajj season, like the Christmas season. And this year we saw, like, unfortunately, Ryanair, they lost the entire season of, they decided in advance in December, they claimed that, like they declared, I mean, that they will lose the entire season, and they will not just try to get any benefit from this season of the Christmas, unfortunately. The multi-commodity is basically when you operate multiple fleet types. So basically we have two types of operations. You have the hub and spoke, where you can having your maintenance station and everything located in one hub, and you have the point to point. So let's just like start to tackle the problem one by one. At the beginning, I would like to talk about the difference between the low-cost carriers and the full-service airlines. Talking about that, we will find that the low-cost carriers, they always seek the route profitability. And this is why in some airlines, commercial airlines, you will find some people working in what we call route profitability analysis. Okay, that is very good. I like that, but it doesn't work all the time, because sometimes when we have a combination between hub and spoke and point to point, sometimes you will have to operate your airline or your fleet to specific destinations where you are not making profit due to political issues, due to maybe some trading agreements, due to bilateral agreements, like any type of agreements, or you are a part of an alliance, by the way. Okay, but in the full service airline, you need to consider the network profitability. So low cost carrier, you're looking for route. For full service, you're looking for network profitability. For the flight fare, usually they have one flight fare available on the aircraft, the low cost carrier. For the full service airline, they have diverse, and they have even different times of reservations. They have what we call the light reservation, or the basic, or the luxurious, or like the luxurious destination. So they have different types of flight fares. I will not tackle the point of the economic fare right now, but like later on we can discuss this. The network, usually they work on, like the low cost, they usually work on point to point, no connecting flights. The network in the full service airlines most probably is hub and spoke, but sometimes also is point to point, but they are providing the connecting flights. And this is a very big difference, because the insurance is around between 25 to 28% of the total operating cost of the airline. And for the low-cost carriers, they don't charge you in the ticket, in the air ticket, in the airfare, they don't charge you this 25%. Whereas in the full-service airline, they charge you this 25% more. So this is why you will always find that the full-service airline, the price of the ticket should be much higher than the low-cost carrier, because they are covering around 25% more than the low-cost carrier. And this is the basic of the insurance. The yield is basically the break-even value of the passengers that I need to basically to hit my target of revenue and profit. Here, the calculation is very easy, because usually you work with one flight fare, but of course it's a little bit more complicated in the full-service airline. For the airport gate assignments, the low-cost carriers, they don't get any benefit, and the full-service airline, they get all the benefit. Okay, there is a say that I saw from one of the chairmen from one of the airlines before, and I really liked it, and I would like to quote it here. The low-cost carrier can be more costly after adding all services than full-service airline. So if you're booking a low-cost flight, for example, with a low-cost carrier, and then you found that, like, okay, I need to pay for extra insurance for my baggage, I need to add some meals, I need to add whatever, like the choice of the seat, like any of these additions that you add, you will find that you pay more than what you would pay for one thing. Actually, it happened with me. Like I booked one time, like I was traveling between Europe, and I booked the entire flight with 25 euros, and I paid 180 euros just for the luggage. So that was crazy. Okay, 25 against like 180, because I tried to save the, like, you know, $100 of like going by train or something like that. So that was just like a crazy story that happened with me. So you don't get any advantages of the low cost usually, unless you want to pay more. So the stakeholders for the airlines are usually the authorities, competitors, mergers and alliances, suppliers and service providers, manufacturers, shareholders, and financial institutes. So why I do mention this? Here we need to have a stop, because in times of disruptions, you need to go to every single one stakeholder of these people, and you need to start having a bilateral agreement with him, or what we call maybe multilateral agreement. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you need to try to get out of your comfort zone. You need to try to find a way of passing this catastrophe or this disruption. Okay, so asking the authorities for subsidies, for waiving of taxes. Some of the authorities, by the way, when they just start to promote this green energy and moving to more sustainability and all of this, like the global trading direction of going towards a cleaner energy operation, some of the authorities actually, they waive the taxes. So they're like, okay, if you show that you're decreasing the amount of CO2 emissions, the carbon footprint, like all of this stuff, like we will waive your taxes. And this is a very big amount of cost for some operators. Okay, you need to be complying with your competitors. Sometimes you can go with your competitors to the same alliance, to Star Alliance, to One World Alliance, to whatever it is, and to operate together instead of like us killing each other in the time of disruption. Maybe we can find a way of both of us like trying to pass this. This is why I'm just like adding all of these stakeholders here, because this is what we face right now. What we face right now, actually, we're trying to do bilateral agreements and collaborations with all of the stakeholders that we have in the airlines, I mean commercial airlines. Okay, moving to the airline integrated planning. Just like a very, very quick introduction about like the items of the planning, just to put our hands also on the main points that are affected by the disruption. I mean, we start from the flight schedule, moving to the fleet assignment. You need to assign a specific fleet type on your on each single flight. Moving to the aircraft routing, and here we will start to count the number of block hours. We start to count the flight cycles, flight hours, all of these parameters, just to be able to count when and where the aircraft will stop. The crew pairing is a very, 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 very difficult. Actually, using humans in any calculation will be literally a pain. Like, I really hate dealing with people in the rostering and the crew pairing. It's really a pain because sometimes they get sick, sometimes they are not committed, sometimes they can find any excuses. Like, so just to be able to adjust the crew scheduling with the other parameters, this is one of the most tough problems that we always face in the airline industry. So what is the sequence? Basically, we start from the flight schedule, moving to the fleet assignment, moving to the aircraft routing. We will start to count the number of hours that each aircraft does, and at the same time we will see the assigned crew pairing, like who are the crew assigned to this aircraft. And they went from Cairo to New York. Okay, from New York, what they're like, they're already exceeding. They have already exceedance in the. They already flew more than 8 hours. It's certainly more even than 12 hours. So what is the solution now? They cannot fly back. So I need to plan for another crew to bring the aircraft back from New York to Cairo. This is what we face actually especially in times of disruption. Someone who had an attack. So one of the solutions that some of the airlines they went for is the main flights or the strategic flights. We will assign 2 crew per flight. It will not be only 1 crew, it will be 2 crews per flight. And sometimes we need to add more number of aircraft. Sometimes we need to have more scheduling because, or to do the rescheduling because we cannot operate it like that. Okay, so the planning robustness, this is how we fight the disruption in the planning phase. Basically, set up the plan taking into consideration that you have resources and do not consider only the resources that you have. You need to consider more resources that you have basically. This is one of the points, and I know there will be a penalty, and this is why we talk about the second part, basically the changes that happen due to uncertain events. When you plan, you need to put into your considerations that this plan is subjected to change, and this change cannot be expected, can be uncertain. They have a lot of uncertain events. You lost demand stimulation. You need to do downsizing for your aircraft. I don't have an aircraft available. Or like the other way around, I need to combine 2 flights. Let's say I travel to a certain destination in 3 times per day. I want to have this 3 times. I found that the demand stimulation for this destination is like 100 passengers per day. Why do I need to operate 3 flights? I can combine the flights. And actually, we have the traffic right. So I can send my passengers anytime within the 3 slots that I have because I already bought the traffic rights, the air traffic rights. So basically, combining flights together will need a larger aircraft. What if I don't have this larger aircraft? And this is why when you plan for acquiring another fleet or operating in a high season or hiring even some of your resources or equipment or personnel or maintenance personnel or whoever you are hiring, you need to put into consideration there are like some uncertain events. Now will be a very big problem to tackle. What is the trade-off between the changes that I will be doing and the penalty? Let's say, for example, I decided not to operate a certain flight because I don't have an aircraft available, I don't have a demand stimulation, I started to decide to cancel the entire flight. There will be a penalty. This penalty, you need to compensate the passengers, you need to pay still for your traffic rights that you didn't use. You will have some penalties based on the organizations that you are part of, like, for example, your shareholders, your stakeholders, your alliances, people with you in the same alliance. You will have to pay a lot of penalties. What is the trade-off here? Is a penalty bigger enough to make the change, or I shall just like do the change and I don't care about the penalty? I'll tell you a story. One of the institutes, they subjected a penalty over one of the big commercial airlines, and basically it was the IATA. Okay, so the IATA was having some penalties on some airlines. I know one case at least, and then they told us, like, okay, listen, you don't have this equal opportunity of having all the employees in the airline industry having the same salaries. So let's say we will subject a penalty of, let's say, $5 million per year if you don't raise the salaries of your employees. So the airline told the IATA, look, okay, you know what? I need $50 million to raise the salary of my employees per year, and I will pay the penalty of $5 million, and I will save the $45 million. So I would rather pay the penalty. Actually, they are not being like tricky about it. Like, they were very clear about it. Like, okay, like I will do the trade-off. I will go for the best of me. Like, you know, that's it. So how to do the robust analysis or the robust planning of your airline? You need to assign the plan at the beginning. You need to solve for the changes to see how many changes you need to have, and then the changes, when they actually happen, you will know that there is some penalty to pay. Now you need to do the trade-off calculation. Is a penalty higher or losing the demand stimulation for future is higher. What is higher? So now we have two types of robustness to take into consideration. We have the solution robustness, working with mathematics. All the people of the academic people who love the mathematics, like we need to do all the calculations and like, okay, perfect. Like here's I will cancel this flight and I will assign this aircraft and I will be like, okay, perfect. Like I got my fleet assignment and everybody's happy. Thank you very much. But you need to put into consideration the model robustness, what you will lose in the future. There is a very big part of the operating cost related to indirect cost, and I will talk about this in 5 minutes. Okay, so just to understand this, we will have to tackle the performance measures. What are the performance measures that we need to consider in an airline? Starting from what we call available seat kilometer. Available seat kilometer is basically the amount of availability that you have in your airline. This is exactly what we use to measure the network strength. If I am getting into an airline with an alliance or a bilateral agreement, let's say X airline is getting into an alliance with Y airline. X airline have an ASK of, let's say, 70 units, and Y airline have it like 20 units. Certainly, the X airline, this airline is much stronger than the other airline, and it will be dominating it. This is one of the parameters that we really need to put into consideration before tackling any type of alliances. Back to the occupation and aircraft utilization, we need to look for the load factor. What is the amount of utilization for passenger seats? I have 100 seats available on the aircraft. My load factor is 70%. That means that I will fill out, I will reserve, I will sell 70% of the seats available. Okay, so they are now related. Okay, the passenger spill is a number of passengers that is more than what you have available. The ground time, this is a very, very big important parameter. The aircraft and resource utilization, you need to always I will show you, actually, I have some nice insights that I will show you here for a real airline, and I will show you the graphs. You will be stunned with the numbers. Like you will see how much losses they are making just to ground the aircraft for a lot of time. The gross domestic product, the GDP, is one of the main economic insights, basically tackling the problem of disruption also, because when the GDP goes down, that means that the entire national or the global industry economic is going down. When it goes up, that means very big praise. The RPK is basically the revenue per passenger kilometer. It is related somehow, and we will talk about the details of this, not here, of course, in this session, because it's just a short session, but we usually talk about the revenue, the relationship between the revenue per passenger kilometer and the ASK. Okay, so what is available and what are you bringing as revenue based on this availability? Okay, this is a very, very important parameter. So back to this, the ASK, as it is one of the most important parameters here, we will divide it into two parts: the cost per available seat kilometer and the revenue per available seat kilometer. Of course, if you're coming from US or you're just from the other part of the world, you will find something called CASM instead of CASK. So it will be cost per available seat mile. Okay, so the Americans, they usually like to deal with miles, which is I never understood, because like it's very, very confusing for me. But like here in the Middle East, we like to talk about kilometers, and we always measure. And this is the problem between me and my American wife. My American wife, she always talks in miles, and I always and inch and feet, and I always talk in centimeters and meters and kilometers. And so usually we just have this conflict anyhow. So this is just the point or the unit cost that you need to pay per your network, and this is the unit revenue that you get from your network. Okay, let's just like make this very clear. Also talking about the RPKs, the revenue per passenger kilometer, and the GDP. Okay, here is one very, very important point. In 2020, it was estimated that the global contribution for airlines are around $2.7 trillion. That is around 3.6 of the global domestic product of the entire world. The entire global economic value of the entire world, the airline industry is around 3.6% only of the contribution. although it is very harmful for us. And this takes us to what is the profit that you get from your airline. Does anyone know any percentages of what we can expect from the percentage of profit? I will tell you the number actually. If anyone knows, just please put it in the chat, but I will tell you the number. Usually the commercial airlines, they get between 0.5, not 50%, 0.5% to the maximum of 4 to 5% as a profit out of the investment. So if you are investment with every $100 that you are investment in your airline, you're just getting a profit of like $1. That's very little, very little. So imagine if you can save 0.5% of the price of the fuel, of your performance measures, of any type of measures that you have. This will be a huge contribution. So do never just downsize the amount of innovations that you can have in your airline. It can really save a lot. Okay. So one last graph here is talking about the break-even value. We have three types of airlines. Actually, the blue one that they are having close to between 90 to 100% of the break-even load factor, which is they need around, their operating cost is so high so that they need around 90% of the occupation of the seating capacities that they have on their aircraft. That means that 90%, less than 90%, they will lose. And usually these airlines, they get into bankruptcy. This is what happened with Freddie Laker, with People's Express, with a lot of other airlines, Alitalia and KLM and Air France, and like a lot of the airlines that have this mergers, they went through this, and the story is a lot, okay? They went through this. They had to have a very, very high load factor. The medium load factor, they are at risk. The profitable load factor is usually less than 70%. If you require less than 70% to survive, to make profit, you are okay. That's it. So, moving to the part that I really, really love, the fleet asset planning. I really love this part because we have two types of fleet acquisition. You have a unified fleet, or you can have diverse types of fleet in your airline. Unified fleet, that means one fleet type going everywhere. You're using it in all of your operations. That's it. Point. End of story. For the diverse, you have different types of fleet. One for long haul operation, one for short haul operation, one for medium range, one for domestic flights, one have like very, very high CASK, another one for having like a very low CASK. So just having a diverse will have some disadvantages, but at the same time will have a lot of advantages. Okay. And this is a point of tackle. Like if you have a homogeneous fleet and heterogeneous fleet, the homogeneous fleet is a unified fleet. Basically, one fleet type comes with more flexibility in covering schedules. Like, okay, I have a problem. One aircraft went to the maintenance. I have another one to cover. The working stuff are the same. I don't have to train more people. And the same tool, same spare parts, same spare engines, same everything, same types of oil. Everything is the same. But there is one disadvantage here is the lack of good coverage. If you want to expand your operation, the certain fleet types will not be able to help you in that. Whereas in the type of the heterogeneous fleet, you give more coverage because you have like different like short haul operation aircraft and long range aircraft and like all this. So you can even cover more destinations and you have a better balance for the coverage. You can do an alliance and feeling comfortable in your alliance with another airline. I don't have this panic of like, oh, I cannot go to this destination or I cannot make a lot of profit with this bilateral agreement with the other airline because they cover the long haul and I only cover the short haul. Like you don't have this panic, but at the same time, you need more of qualifications. You need more of qualified people, qualified pilots, qualified crew, qualified maintenance personnel. And one very big problem is incidents can happen. I will tell you also one of the stories about one of the airlines. They had this problem of they bought a new aircraft with a different engine, and then Rolls-Royce, the engine was Rolls-Royce. The Rolls-Royce told them, like, okay, you need to specifically use this type of oil for my engines. And then they were like panic. And I was like, okay, but like we have the other type of oil from another supplier. I'm like, okay, if anything happens to the engine, I'm like, it's not my responsibility. The insurance will not cover it. So this airline had to change the seals and some of the components to do maintenance overall for the entire fleet, more than 70 aircraft with all the spare engines. just to change for one type of oil. They did all of this just to avoid this incident that may happen due to the different or the heterogeneous fleet. Okay, so it's really serious. Like if you're considering heterogeneous fleet, you really need to put this into your consideration. Okay, so this is just like a very, we'll not go to the details, but like let's say one of the times you have a high season, you want to add more aircraft to your fleet. You have two types. Like here, I brought actually. This is a study that I made before. I got like two figures of pricing of airlines. You know, there are a lot of lessors basically. Like you can go to one of the lessors and like, okay, you know what? Like I need this type of aircraft, and like they give you like this number, like $39 million, and the other one tell you like, okay, it's only 30, and here like okay, 30 again and 11. So I brought like two figures from the lessors, two figures of ownership, aircraft ownership. And actually, if you find here on the right graph that when you change basically the number of adding the aircraft in the figure number 2, in figure number 1 it will not make a difference. In figure number 2, it will conflict here. At a certain number of aircraft, it will be more cost effective to bring the Boeing 757, the Boeing 757 instead of the Boeing 737. So it will be more effective after a certain number of aircraft just to switch. But I want to tell you a story that, and this is what I was telling you, that a lot of the people in the research, they get into this black hole, academic research, I mean, because when you work in an airline, in the airline industry, and you're not coming from a background, an academic background, you will find that all of the calculations that we do are based on the direct cost only. 50% of the operating cost of the airlines are not coming from direct cost. 50%. So you're considering only 50%. So if I'm saying like, oh, the cost of this aircraft is amazing, let's buy it. Okay, I'm talking only about the 50% of the cost. But I didn't consider the depreciation rate, amortization. I didn't consider the uncertain events that happen to the old to the structure failures, for example. Like I didn't consider a lot the landing fees. I didn't consider a lot of the things that I would have due to the indirect cost that I have. Okay, so this curve is just showing just the direct cost that is subjected to this calculation, to this mathematical model that I showed here. Okay, so this is a little bit deceiving. Don't believe it very much, but it's just as a showcase. Okay, so let's talk about Pan Am Airlines. This case, I really love it because it's a very inspiring case. They start in 1927. Does anyone know when did the first airline start worldwide? I need to hear an answer. Does anyone know what is the first airline worldwide? Okay, maybe you can write it in the chat. I will tell you. It was in 1909. It was called Dilag, and they didn't have aircraft. The first airline that had aircraft, it was in 1914. And another airline, 1919, it was KLM, and it was the first airline that is still existing until now. So 1927, that's really old, okay? Until the 70s, they were doing amazing. It's the first airline worldwide that was doing like cross-Atlantic flights. They were transferring like around like 11 millions of passengers. That was in the 70s. In the 70s, they decided to move their fleet to 41% of the fleet assets to be the jumbo Boeing 747. In 1973, it started the catastrophe, disastrous jet fuel prices went 3-4 times more than what it should be, and then eventually in the 80s, they declared the bankruptcy of the airline. This is what happens when you don't put into your considerations that there are disruptions, that when I buy this big aircraft just to have cross-Atlantic flights, okay, what happens if you lose the demand stimulation for the cross-Atlantic? What happens if the fuel price went up? You have no idea, okay? So, talking about the airline operating cost, we have the structure of the operating cost as follows. 50%, around 50% is direct cost, and I will show you now the exact numbers, okay, from G41. Okay, so around 30% is coming from fuel, around 9.5% coming from maintenance, one of the biggest numbers is coming from the ownership and insurance, as I told you, between 25 to 27%. It's coming from the ownership and insurance on the assets basically that you have. This is a very big number, and this number, low-cost carriers, they don't add it on your ticket, by the way, and this is why they can sell you the price with a very low price. So for the fuel and oil, we're talking about like 30%. Imagine if you can just save 1 or even 0.5% of the fuel on board. I will talk about that in just like 30 seconds. Okay, the maintenance is fixed. All of these numbers, by the way, are different from different sources. If you try to track and to check if I am right or wrong, you will find that there are many sources talking about that. So I collected all the sources basically from ICAO, from Department of Transportation, IATA Economic Reports, IATA ACMG committee. Like I collected them and I did the average, and these are the numbers averaged. Okay, so talking about the operating cost is consisting of ground operating cost and flight operating cost. The flight operating costs, just very quickly, they are basically depending on your performance. If you have a very strong operation team, people working in the integrated operation control center, what we call the IOCC, they will find a good cost index. Cost index is basically, it shows how fast you want to go and how much fuel you want to save for your airline. Okay, very simple math. If you want to arrive to your destination faster, you will not save fuel. If you want to go slower, you will reach your destination still in 30 minutes more, but you will save a lot of fuel. So this is what we call the maximum range cruise, MRC, and long range cruise, LRC, and there are so many parameters that are affecting the cost index basically for the airline. This needs to be calculated. I know some of the airlines, they take it as a fixed. They can like, okay, if you're going domestic flights, take it as 18 units. If you're going international flights, take it as 30 units. This is wrong. You need to calculate it. This will really affect your performance. Okay, so this is very important, guys. Like the Form 41 from the Department of Transportation, you will find here, this is real data, of course, like as you can expect, 48% is coming from direct cost. 48%. I'm talking about like 50% almost. And the rest, look, advertisement, aircraft servicing expenses, amortization, depreciation, maintenance, whatever, service expenses for passengers, like a lot of other indirect costs that are affecting the total operating cost. Usually, as academics, we usually take this number. Just pay attention. If you are working in academia, and I know there are a lot of attendees from academia here, please pay attention that we usually work with this number. We work with 50%, almost less even than 50% of the cost that we need to take into consideration. I did the same mistake, okay? So I know it, everybody knows it, but we need to make our academic research a little bit like more realistic, okay? This is for the passenger. You will find for the cargo a little bit of different percentages. For cargo, we're having around 35% as direct cost. We're having around 65 indirect cost, and this is because in the cargo they have a lot of insurance. Like one of the very big, percentages, 44% is the insurance. Okay, so this is what we were talking about. Okay, so this is coming from one of the research that I did for one airline. Basically, they have 108 aircraft for some operations and some fleets. This is how they utilize their fleet. They utilize their fleet with 62, around like almost 50% of the utilization is coming from one fleet type. That's not very smart, actually. That's not very good. So I'm just showing that just to show you that, okay, you're having a lot of assets and you're not using them. Okay, what will happen with the other assets? I will show you just right now. But before that, we need also to talk about one last thing about the operating cost. Some of the operating costs are coming from regulatory additional obligations. Like, for example, the Malaysian Airlines. We all know the story that happened with Malaysia Airlines. Okay, so in Malaysia Airlines, the flight MH370, it disappeared in March 2014. And actually, the effort to, like, it was going for like 9 months almost to try to find this aircraft. They failed. All of the equipment, all of the technology, they failed to find this aircraft. Until now, we don't know where is the aircraft. Okay, so basically, the ICAO had some regulatory compliances, obligations, basically to install a specific antenna on all of the aircraft to be applied starting from 2018 on all of the aircraft worldwide. Okay, that was a very big expenses, but that was obligatory expenses. We had all to do it in all of our aircraft. Actually, they extended this deadline because like it was just crazy to cover everything until 2018. But eventually, we're talking about obligations for the operating cost. Okay, so the fleet maneuver in disruption. What shall we do in times of disruption? Reduce thrust takeoff. We're talking about performance. Faster climb. These are flight factors. I know that some people here are joining us from Airbus, and some people are basically, they are experts in the performance, aircraft performance. I know it, so I know that these people will relate very, very much. They know exactly what is the reduced thrust takeoff. They know exactly what is the AGL, aircraft ground or above ground level, that they have to go above, depending on the Jepson charts. So basically, all of these parameters or considerations that you need to take in your performance calculation will affect the fuel consumption, will affect the flight factors during the disruption. Sometimes, if I am flying very fast, for example, like if you're having a strategic flight, your president is having a presidential flight in an Air Force One, for example, and like he's going for a meeting. He doesn't care about the fuel. But let's imagine for a commercial flight, if you cannot operate your aircraft fast enough because it consumes a lot of fuel, the passengers are already paying a little bit of your expenses, okay? So, like usually, our suggestion is to change the plan. Do not move your aircraft on the high performance parameters. Just move a little bit towards the MRC and LRC. The maximum range cruise, it will take a little bit longer, but you will save a lot of fuel. Okay, this is for the parameters related to the flight parameters, the ground parameters. Shall I use extra equipment, ground equipment, for example, or shall I just depend on whatever I have in ground equipment or the aircraft to save fuel? Okay, so the demand and scheduling. We're almost like, I still need like some more minutes, more than what I promised actually, but let's just like very quickly go towards this. The scheduling, flight schedule, crew scheduling, maintenance, facility, get schedule assignment, service, scheduling assignment. All of these parameters we need to put into consideration when we do our scheduling. Okay, so I will not talk about all of this because every single point of this is really, really annoying and it's really taking a lot of the hassle. But we need to talk about during disruption. I need to make my schedule stable and flexible. Okay, let's just have this. The stability of the schedule, that means that your schedule will reflect immunity to the changes. If you have a disruption or if you have a delay, the schedule will be stable enough not to change a lot and not to just annoy your entire point. If it's flexible enough, that means that you can change. Let's say that you get the slot. Let's say I have an aircraft that is departing at 10. And for some technical reasons, it couldn't depart at 10. It departed at 11. Will this affect the rest of the schedule? This is what we call schedule flexibility. The slack that we have in the people of OR, they will understand what I'm saying, okay? The slack that we have in the schedule. What is the range that I can move in? Okay, so these are two main parameters for the schedule. Calculated example, like actually this is one of the research that I did also, like the yellow one is, it was like a scheduled airline where one aircraft moving like two routes, like one route, second route, okay? And then I changed the schedule just 15 minutes. I imagined that my schedule was robust enough to change this 15 minutes. So basically, with this just 15 minutes, I could make with the same aircraft 4 flights instead of just like 2 flights. How this happened? Because basically I am keeping the calculation of the turnaround time. So I kept the turnaround time, and eventually I kept the schedule. Okay. So the passenger demand trends. Okay, let's just like start with normally from 2019. Everything was normal. 2020, as you can see, everything went down. Passenger demand went 75%, down. Revenue went 70% down. Capacity of the ASK, like the airlines started to have bankruptcies. They started to sell their assets. They started to lose. They started to ground their assets. So the ASK, the amount of availability, the capacities of each airline went down 70%. That's crazy. What they will do in 2021, what they will do in 2025. They didn't think about that. Okay, the load factor went 20% less. Like, that is really brutal. Okay, so I know that whatever penalty we will be taking into consideration, it will not cover all of this disruptions, but at least we need at least to cover a little bit of them. And this is just like how the load factor moved from between 2019 to 2020. Okay, so in 2020, the IATA said, like, guys, I am expecting that I will have huge drop regardless the seasonal fluctuations that happens in the demand. So the analysis was really brutal, and we have a lot of statistics about that I will not go through right now, but the IATA went really, really viral in that. And they said that if the ICAO passed this regulation of just keeping one seat in between every 2 passengers, this will move the break-even load factor to 67%. What happens if you are coming from the Middle East? You need to achieve 75% to be able to bring profit. If you're working less than 75%, you're certainly losing. Okay, ICAO didn't pass the regulation, thanks God, and we continue with packing all the passengers in the seats, and we had to take some other precautions like changing the filters of the ventilation system of the aircraft, using like some other technology techniques and stuff like that. So thankfully, thanks God, the ICAO didn't pass this regulation. It would be brutal for the entire industry. Okay, this is something really interesting. I hope that it will be new for you. We need to take into consideration some delay trends. Okay, let me talk about this. Delay trends. So in 2006, the airline industry in US, they lost $7.7 billion just for a delay trend of 15 minutes. The average delay for all of the flights was just 15 minutes. That costed the entire US air transport $7.7 billion as losses. Okay. In 2009, after the economic crash, of course, in 2008, 23% of the airlines in US were delayed. In 2020, I will not talk, of course, about this airline. I think you will know better, okay? So we have 2 types of delays. We have what we call single delay and propagated delay. Just pay attention that whenever we have a single delay, it can lead to a propagated delay. So if I'm planning to have one sector flight and then a second sector, if the first sector will be delayed, the second sector will certainly be delayed, okay? This is just like for your information, okay? This is the delay trends that I calculated in one of my research. Basically, this is just the delay in departure. Like, we calculated the delays in departure and in arrivals and the average delay and all of this. The delay in departure was an exponential curve, around 22%, 22 minutes of delay in an exponential curve. Of course, the people of statistics will relate to that. That means that your confidence interval of 95% will say that like 95% probability I will have like 22% as average of or the mean value of delay. You need to take this into consideration when you do your schedule. When I do my schedule, I need to have put into consideration that my flight has more than 95% probability that the average delay will be around 22 minutes of delay. So I need to move the slack between flights just to keep into consideration this this version. Okay, let's now, of course, all of the people working in the Arab countries, the Middle East will know this guy. I love him very much. Let's move now to some very, very interesting insights. Okay, let's move to here. Let me show you some analysis. This is some analysis that we did for operations before disruption. Okay, as you can see here, these are the fleet types available for this airline. These are real analysis from a real airline, real operations. Okay, these are the available aircraft on this airline. Okay, around 50%. This airline around like 34, and this fleet type is around 34, and this fleet type is around 16. So these two are the same, like old version of 737 and new version of 737. So it's like the same. Okay, you're utilizing around 50% of your operations utilizing one fleet type. Okay, of course, these are the destinations that you can see here. Whenever you click here, you find your destinations. This big red circle, that means that I have a very big delay in this destination. In this city, I have a very big delay. So here we can even find the delay is coming from where. I know that the average delay, for example, for this aircraft is around 41 minutes as delay. Okay, for this aircraft is around, let's say, 28 minutes, and so on. Okay, so with each aircraft type, with these insights, I can exactly know how many minutes do I have as average of the entire operation for expected delay. And then I can reschedule for disruption that I am expecting that the delay will happen within 45 minutes, for example, in this destination. So I make a bigger slack between the source and the destination in this city. Okay, let's move, for example, to Jeddah, the flights to Jeddah. I have an average of passenger occupation around 162 passengers. Okay, if I have an average of demand 162, and you're sending the Boeing 777, for example, to Cairo, Jeddah, you're losing, certainly. You're having around like more, like availability of more than 300, around 313 seats available, and you're just occupying 160. That's crazy. So this is the importance of these insights. It will show you how much exactly you can operate your airline. Here you can find the service time. What is the average of each fleet type staying on ground? You will find, like, for example, like the most operating fleet, which is the 737 next generation. It operates with grounding time around like more than 3 hours and a half. That's crazy. That's a lot. That's too much, actually. Like keeping the aircraft as average more than 3 hours and a half just to be grounded. That's not accepted, actually. So these insights will give you a little bit of like how you can maneuver around your fleet, how you can utilize the fleet. Let's say, for example, to Jeddah, how you did utilize the fleet. You found that we send 4 fleet types. Let's just like neglect the 1%. 3 fleet types: 13% of 737, 9% of 330, and another 8% of the 330-200. So this is basically what you need to find. You need to find where are the cities that are making a lot of nonsense, and you need to find the utilization of your fleet. Back to the presentation, just to close it, how to adjust the schedule. Basically, we have some ideas about adjusting the schedule, combining flights, alliances, load factor guarantee with the authorities, adjust the fare class, decrease the turnaround time, the grounding time, and make your schedule flexible and stable, please. Okay, and the dilemma now: shall I reserve my ticket now, or I shall reserve it later? Okay, we have very, very big, interesting research in this. Basically, the airfare. How to, like, shall I sell the fare right now, early in a lower price, or later in a lower price? It depends on the destination. If you're going to Bangkok, for example, you will not go to Bangkok to do business. You're going to Bangkok to have fun, to hang out, to go with your girlfriend, to do whatever you need to do in your life just for joy. So going to Bangkok, you will certainly not reserve it a day before. You will certainly reserve your vacation 3 months before. So in this way, or in this destination, I would rather sell the high price ticket 3 months before, and whenever it gets closer to the time of travel, I will make it like very cheap, just to increase the load factor. That's it. So there are some strategies about how to do the pricing here. Okay. So the last part that we will be talking about, just give me 2 more minutes and I will be finishing the consolidation or the coexistence. The consolidation with the airlines, this is number one, and then the consolidation with the authorities. The consolidation with the airlines, you need to keep into consideration that whenever you have an alliance with another airline or a part of an alliance or a co-chair or whatever you call it, bilateral agreement, you may be subjected to a bankruptcy. If you cannot stand their operation, they will actually dominate you and you will be done. Okay, this happened in 1987 after the Act of Deregulation 1978 in US. People's Express was one of the most successful airlines in US. It was a low-cost airline, and actually the American Airlines in the 80s, the early 80s, they had a strategy, a very, very smart strategy. They created what we call the yield management, and eventually they could actually do sectoring for their pricing. They did very big work in the revenue management, and that led to the bankruptcy of People's Express, the low cost. They went lower than the low cost. They could manage their fleet to fly specific flights with specific trends, with low cost flights, to just beat. Because in the Act of Deregulation 1978, basically it was an open sky agreement. Like everyone can do whatever they want. Okay, so you don't have the government, they don't have any control over the flight fare. And this is actually contradicts what happens in 1919 in the Paris Convention, 1919. Okay, that was like very, very early, like more than 100 years ago. So in 1987, they got a bankruptcy. They offered everything, like Frontier Airlines, they acquired them, and then United Airlines, they refused, and then United Airlines, they acquired them later, and like a lot of mess that happened. The same story happened with KLM Air France in 2004, 2014, Etihad and Alitalia, and we have a lot of stories to tell. Okay, this is just to pay attention about your bilateral agreement with other airlines. The last part is a bilateral agreement with authority. Basically, the objective of the airline is to make more RPK. The objective of the authority is to have more passenger flow in their airports. Okay, so basically, they started to have these bilateral agreements, government open sky agreements, and actually, until now, some sectors or some regions worldwide, like for example, the Middle East, we're still afraid of doing that. We're still afraid of going to the perfect competition. We're afraid. We're still feeling more comfortable with the monopoly. We still feel more comfortable that I don't want this government open sky agreement that like an American airline can come and compete with me in Qatar or Bahrain or Egypt or Saudi Arabia. Like, it's like, I'm really afraid of that. So we're still not there yet, but in Europe, in US, they are still going towards the open sky agreements. And of course, like a lot of sites about that. And the services provided by the governments are many, actually. The monetary assistance, the get assignments, the load factor guarantee, waiving some tax fees. Just as a case, as I told you, in Japan, the load factor guarantee that happened between All Nippon Airlines and Japanese authorities. Also, one of the cases, like as I told you, the load factor guarantees. I agreed the first year that they will start to have a target of a load factor 62. After they got the higher demand in the second year, they got up to 80% load factor, which is the load factor started to grow a little bit more. Okay. Last case is the airport gate privilege. Gate privilege, basically, when you do some CFD analysis for the airport, this is the airport terminal. Basically, this is a study that we did. You can just like do the flow simulation, and then eventually you decide which gate has the priority, and then you can give it to the signatory airlines as an incentive. So now we finished our session. I just have final wrap up, and then I will receive your questions. Just to close it, the final wrap up, you need to optimize the revenue through network planning. That is the key factor. Network planning, integrated planning, crew planning, fleet asset planning, lease or buy, do an alliance or not to do, do a code share or not, being a part of an alliance or not, like all of the ask for government support or not, like the government will not, like nobody like works for free. Okay, if you're asking for the government for something, like they will certainly come up with something to take from you. Okay, so just keep this into consideration. Okay, so you need to have very, very strong statistics. As I showed you, the business intelligence is now everywhere. The data science is booming everywhere. You need to have support tools. You need to have software. You need to have a platform. Actually, we started this project 1 year ago. Sorry, with my team. Like it's my pleasure actually. Like some of them are attending here, or maybe a couple of them are attending only the meeting. But with my team, I'm glad to announce that we started our platform, as that will be launched in 2 months, inshallah. This will be an online platform where we can do all the robust calculations for airlines using the asset management and disruption management, delay trends, some incentives about some insights about the business intelligence, and some optimization, statistical or mathematical optimization modules. This will be launched in 2 months from now. Stay tuned. I will let you the news. Just as a recovery, you need to get rid of, like in case of big disruptions, you need to get rid of like some of the overheads. Some people, of course, this is a black joke. Okay, I really do not love this. You can kill your professionals, basically, just shoot them or just do a layoff. But this is a black joke. Okay, so nobody does that. The support asks for subsidy, robust and recovery plans, or load factor guarantee. This is the end of my presentation. Just I would like to tell you that I have a course coming up next week. If anyone wants to check it, it will be for an entire week, for 5 days. This is basically I can share this with you. You'll find it on the website. A lot of people already is signing in. So this course will be talking specifically about how to do the calculations that I talked about. These are the modules, and this is the agenda of the course. So I will share with this with you if you want. And eventually, thank you very, very much for this nice opportunities that you gave me just to present. And this is the end of the presentation. Did anyone understand anything or have any questions? Thank you very much. Yes, please. I cannot see. Like, if someone is asking, like, or want to talk, like, please, yeah. Who?
Can I?
Oh, Dr. Amr, yeah, of course, please.
Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. Thank you, Hossam, for this very interesting presentation. I'm sure I benefited a lot. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
I am from academia, so please take my comment here in this context. What I would like to do is that, and I think it is very important for the practitioners like you, is to distinguish between variability and disruption.
Yes.
Okay, a very quick comparison. Variability is sporadic. Disruption is sustained. Variability is caused by uncertainty and noise and cause losses. Disruption is like sustained low demand, and it may cause extinction or getting out of business. Variability, we manage it with operations management tools, like you explained, like the dynamic scheduling, crew rostering, and stuff like that. But in case of disruption, like the cases of 1973 you discussed, 2008, and 2020 in COVID, well, this is more sustained, and for this we need to make agreements and more of tactical and strategic decisions. So I would like to divide what you have said, and maybe I'm asking you to divide what you have mentioned into two classes. Issues related to variability and noise and operations management and day-to-day operations, as opposed to more sustained issues, more sustained symptoms like COVID, and their tactical and strategic. Both they were kind of mixed. So I would like to hear from you this kind of distinction between the two classes. And again, thank you for the very interesting presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Amr. Like I really appreciate your comment. I always appreciate your guidance and comments. Yeah, someone wants to add something. Okay, yeah. So yeah, like I really appreciate always your comments. Let me just like tell you that you're definitely right. I will never contradict with you actually. So you're definitely right. In this presentation, I try to tackle different topics basically. As you can see, usually, like for example, when we talk about fleet asset management, we actually like I have some syllabus in 5 days. Like we talk about this subject in 5 complete days. When we talk about network planning, we talk about it in several days. So actually, in this presentation, I try to just bring some tips from here and from there, just to make it cohesive, because it's just like 1 hour informative seminar. I know a lot of people here are coming from academia, and a lot of people actually, like a lot of the attendees are coming also from airlines. So I know that this will be useful for them just to understand the gap between the research and the airline and what are the sectors. But I totally agree with you. This needs to be more explained. And I'm planning, like actually you said something like really interesting, because actually we had the plan yesterday of delivering more of these seminars. I even don't have to be the host myself. Like someone would actually recommend a topic, and we can still promote for it, and we can still do it. So I'm planning to do more sessions from that, and thank you very much for your comments. So does anyone else have any comments or things to add, or anything that comes crosses across the mind? Any questions? Yes, please, Engineer Khalid.
Yes, Hossam, first of all, thank you very much, for the great work. I can imagine, the effort you're doing to try to compress all of that in 1 hour. I was curious to know about the load factor guarantee. I'm not sure if I missed it, or maybe you missed to talk about this as well.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Let me just like very quickly tell you what is the load factor guarantee, just for you to understand the point. Basically, back to the slide. So the load factor guarantee is basically a coordination or collaboration between the airline and the authority, the government authority. Okay. So for example, in our case, it was in Japan, and all Nippon Airlines, they were having a guarantee with the Japanese airport authorities in one of their destinations to make specific flight sectors that were already dead. So basically what they had in the agreement, that was signed agreement, okay? They had an agreement that if the load factor is going less than 35% on the flights happening between the two cities, the airport authority will pay for the airline. If the load factor goes beyond, like above 85%, the airline will pay for the airport authority. And they had a target to work together on the statistics, just to make these statistics viable for the following years. So they had a target of 62%. They said, okay, if we get 62%, we will be okay. Less than 62%, like we will not be okay, okay? So the following year, when they did that, because they were forced to do the flights, when they did that, the second year, the target went up to 80%. So that means that actually they achieved more than 62%. So that was a gain for both of them. First of all, the government or the airport authority, they are looking for flights between their destination and Tokyo, and the airline will not lose. So they're like, okay, perfect. Like, I will guarantee that you will not lose. This is why they call it load factor guarantee, because the airport authority will guarantee that although the airline will operate with a low load factor, they will still pay for them. Okay, so that's the entire point about it. Got it?
Yes, but apart from like this example, like which is a bilateral agreement with the government, is that something that we can really see that it happens somewhere else apart from the government agreements?
Okay, perfect. That's interesting question, actually. In fact, let me tell you that we have the coexistence or the consolidation either with the airport authorities, the government, or with another airline. You will not find this opportunity with another airline. This, or sometimes, like, let me tell you the truth, some of the airlines, they do it, but actually they lose. Because this is what I'm telling you, like, sometimes you will find that the airline, they have this agreement of operating certain sectors together, and the stronger airline will be dominating the other one. So this will not work. Like, I'm telling you, like, this will not work, unfortunately, for some airlines. It will work maybe for between airlines and authorities. I hope this clarifies your question.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot again for the great presentation.
Thank you. Abdurrahman, you have a question.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I just have a question regarding the fuel management topic. How can an airline save a huge portion of cost and by that increasing the profit, while having specific and strict constraints like maximum takeoff weight and aircraft capacity? How can we reduce cost under the light of having such strict constraints?
Okay, thank you. This is a nice question, actually. Like, to understand the exact answer of this question, you need to understand actually some basics about the aircraft performance. And I know that we have here some of the very smart guys of the aircraft performance. They're joining with us. But however, like, just to understand this question, you need to know that we have different strategies of operating the aircraft. As I told you before, sometimes we have something called the cost index. The cost index basically depends on the flight plan that you're doing and the strategies that you're having in your airline. So sometimes some of the airlines, like, okay, perfect, like, I want to win time and I want to bring a good service and I don't care about the fuel or the cost. So I will basically have just a fast trip in my sector. And some other times, some airlines, it's like, okay, I don't care about the time, but I really do care about the fuel. So just to understand this performance parameters, as I told you before, and like, I can even have like a little bit of more explanation later, inshallah, about that. We have something called the maximum range cruise, the long range cruise, like a lot of performance measures. Actually, the AGL, the above ground levels that you can reduce the thrust takeoff, and like all of these parameters, we can just talk about it later in another lecture. But like, basically, it is all around performance. The second point, if you are asking about specifically fuel hedging, for example, hedging is basically fixing the price of the fuel for a certain period. So a lot of the airlines, they go to this technique just to save, like, let's say the price of the barrel is right now, let's say, or the ton of fuel is like $700. Okay, if I have like saved it at $700 and it goes up to 900, I will still pay 700. I will not pay 900. This is what we call fuel hedging. So it's another nice technique that airlines, they go for, and it is very useful sometimes. Yeah. So any other questions?
Thank you for clarifying this, and thank you very much for your effort in this presentation.
Okay, guys. So I'm expecting, like, we're specifically, like, directly is like 1 hour and a half. Thank you very much for all the attendees. I really appreciate it, and I hope that it was good and useful for everybody. Thank you very much, and we will stay all in contact, inshallah. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thank you so much, Hossam. Thank you for your effort.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bashmans Amr.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.